At 11:42 on a Saturday night, I opened my front door because I heard something on the porch steps. I want to be clear about what I was expecting. A raccoon had been getting into my recycling bins for 3 consecutive weeks, and I had developed what I can only describe as a personal grievance. I had tried the bungee cords. I had tried the motion-activated sprinkler. I had, at one point, gone online and read 14 forum posts about raccoon psychology, which I will not elaborate on except to say that the raccoon was winning. So when I heard something on the porch at 11:42, I grabbed my keys because they were the nearest heavy object, and I opened the door, ready to finally have it out. She was sitting on the second step with her shoes in her lap. White satin heels, the kind with a thin ankle strap and a small bow on the toe, or what had been a bow. The one on the left shoe had come off somewhere, leaving just a small loop of thread. Her dress was the kind of white that had clearly started the evening as a different kind of white before it met a puddle and the hem of a parking lot and whatever had happened between those two things. She was looking at the street with the focused, distant expression of someone who had made a decision and was now waiting to find out if it was the right one. I stood there holding my keys like an idiot. I should have asked if she was all right. I should have asked if she needed me to call someone. Every reasonable response available to a person in that situation involves asking a question, and I did not ask any of them. I looked at her for a moment and I said, "I've got coffee on, if you want." She turned and looked at me. She had the kind of eyes that take longer than they should to leave your face. "Yeah," she said. "Okay." She stood up, picked up her shoes by the straps so they swung from 2 fingers, and walked up the last 2 steps and through my front door like she had done it before. I noticed she did not ask what kind of coffee. I noticed she did not look back at the street before she came inside. I noticed that she exhaled just slightly, just once, when I closed the door behind her. I did not think in that moment about what those things meant. I was thinking about whether I had clean mugs and whether the coffee had been sitting long enough to be bad and whether I should offer her something to eat and how to do any of that without making her feel like she owed me an explanation before she was ready to give one. I did not yet know her name. I did not know that she had been 3 hours and 14 minutes earlier standing in the back of a church on Burnside Avenue in a dress that cost more than my first car, holding a bouquet of garden roses, listening to the organist play the opening notes of a processional she had chosen 8 months ago and feeling, with a sudden and absolute certainty, like she was about to walk into a life that did not belong to her. I did not know any of that yet. I just held the door open, and she came in, and I went to pour the coffee. I should have paid more attention to the fact that she did not hesitate. "My name is Marcus Cole. I am 32 years old. I am a structural engineer, which means I spend my days making sure that things meant to hold weight actually do. Bridges, mostly. The occasional public building. I look at a structure and I think about load paths, about where the force goes when something pushes down from above, and whether what is underneath is honest enough to take it. My colleagues think this makes me good at my job. My former fiancé thought it made me exhausting to be around. She was not entirely wrong. I grew up in Eastern Oregon, the kind of town where you either leave or you do not. And I left at 18 for a state school engineering program and never really went back except for holidays. I have lived in Portland for 6 years. I bought the house on Tenino Avenue 4 years ago, which was about 6 months after the engagement ended and about 3 months after I decided that renting an apartment with beige walls was doing something to my sense of self that I did not want to name. The house is a 1924 Craftsman, the kind that looks solid from the street and reveals its complications slowly, which I chose either because I knew what I was doing or because I had no idea. I have replaced the plumbing, refinished the floors, rebuilt the back porch, and installed bookshelves along the entire east wall of the living room. The spare room I have been meaning to finish for 2 years. It still has my table saw in the corner and a daybed that belonged to the previous owner. My job is steady. I make a reasonable living. I have health insurance and a retirement account, and I cook actual meals on weeknights because I found out in my late 20s that takeout every night is something that affects your mood in ways that sneak up on you. I have 3 people I would call close friends, which I think is the right number. I run on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and on Sunday afternoons, I usually do some work on whatever the house needs, which is always something. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that my life before that Saturday night was not unhappy. It was orderly. It was functional. It was the kind of life you build deliberately after something breaks, where every piece is chosen because you trust it and nothing is there by accident. The something that broke was named Claire. We dated for 2 years and were engaged for 8 months. She was smart and she was funny, and she was the kind of person who made every room feel more awake. I loved her. I was certain she loved me. I was not paying enough attention to the fact that love and a future are not automatically the same thing. She ended it on a Tuesday afternoon in March, sitting on the couch in my apartment at the time, with the kind of calm that told me she had been thinking about it for longer than I had known. She said I was steady, and she said it the way you say something is fine. She said I was the kind of man you appreciate in theory. She said she thought she wanted someone who surprised her. She was not cruel about it. She was honest, which in some ways is harder. I have turned that conversation over many times in the years since. I have thought about whether she was right, whether steady is a limitation or a quality, whether the difference between dependable and predictable is something you can feel from the inside. I have not arrived at a clean answer. What I arrived at instead was a quiet decision to stop expecting the kind of surprise you cannot prepare for. I kept my life close to the ground. I worked on the house. I ran on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I left the porch light on every night, which is something I had done since I moved in and had never been able to explain to anyone's satisfaction, including my own. My neighbor Dorothy once asked me if I was waiting for someone. I told her I just did not like coming home to a dark porch. She gave me a look that suggested she found this answer insufficient, and she was probably right. The night Elena Voss sat down on my porch steps, I had been inside reading a structural analysis report for a pedestrian bridge in Beaverton, drinking coffee that had been hot 2 hours earlier, with no particular expectation of what the rest of the evening would bring. Which is to say, I was not ready. I do not think you can be ready for the things that matter. I think you can only have the porch light on and hope that counts for something. As it turned out, it counted for quite a lot. She came inside and stood in the middle of my living room and looked around the way people do when they are deciding whether a place is safe. Not suspicious, just careful. She was still holding her shoes, the straps looped over 2 fingers, and before she said anything else, she bent down and set them by the door in a neat pair, toes facing out. I noticed that, the neatness of it, the fact that she set them down like she was planning to find them again later. Nice floors, she said. Thanks. Refinished them last year. You did it yourself? Most of it. She looked at me like she was adjusting something in her head. Okay, she said. That tracks. I did not ask what it tracked with. I went to the kitchen and poured 2 mugs. When I came back, she was standing at the bookshelf, running one finger along the spines, not pulling anything out, just reading the titles. Her dress had a long zipper up the back that was slightly undone at the top, and her feet were bare on the refinished floor. Black, okay? I said, perfect. We sat at the kitchen table, her across from me, both hands around the mug, and for a while neither of us said anything, which was not uncomfortable the way silences usually are with someone you have known for 4 minutes. It was the quiet of 2 people who had decided, without discussing it, that explanations could wait. I should have been more unsettled. I am a structural engineer. A woman in a wedding dress shows up on your porch at 11:42 and you give her coffee and do not ask questions. That is not a reasonable behavior pattern. I knew that. I did it anyway. How long has the coffee been on? She asked. Couple hours. She looked at the mug. It's good. Low expectations help. She almost smiled at that. Not quite, but something moved in her face, something that was thinking about a smile. I'm Elena, she said. Marcus. She said it once, like she was putting it somewhere she could find it. Do you always open your door this late? Raccoon situation, I said. She looked at me. Long story. Okay, she said. And then, after a moment, touching the small diamond stud in her left ear once and letting her hand drop. I'm not in trouble. I just needed somewhere to stop. Okay, I said. That was it. That was the whole conversation about what had brought her to my porch. I did not ask what she was stopping from or what came next or whether there was someone I should call. I had the sense, and I could not have explained it then, that any question I asked would be a door she had to decide whether to open. And she had been deciding things all night, and she did not need one more. We finished the coffee. She asked if the oak out front had always been that tall. And I said I thought it had been there since the house was built. And she said that was a good thing for a tree. I agreed that it was. Around 1 a.m, she said she was tired. I showed her the couch and got her the blanket from the hall closet, the thick one I kept for actual guests. And she thanked me without making it into something, which I appreciated. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. When I came downstairs at 6:30 in the morning, she was already up. The coffee was on, fresh. And she was standing at the kitchen window in the thin early light with both hands around a mug, looking out at the backyard. She had her hair down now. She had taken off the veil sometime in the night, and I did not see it again. She heard me on the stairs and turned around. I made it a little stronger, she said. Hope that's okay. That's okay, I said. And it was the first ordinary thing. She stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, though that was also true. She had a friend in Northeast Portland, a woman named Jess, who had texted 11 times the night before, and Jess would have come with a blanket and a bottle of wine and no judgment at all. She had that option. She called Jess from my kitchen on Sunday morning while I was pretending to read the paper, and I heard her say, I'm okay. I promise I'm somewhere safe. And then she listened for a long time while Jess said whatever Jess said. And at the end, she said, I know. I just need a few more days. She hung up and stood there looking at the phone for a moment, touching the stud in her left ear, and then she refilled her coffee and came and sat back down across from me. I can't go back to the apartment yet, she said. Daniel has a key. Okay, I said, I don't have anything with me. I don't even have a charger. I've got a charger. She looked at me across the table. The Sunday light was coming in through the kitchen window at a low angle, the kind that makes everything look like it has been there for years. She had her hair pulled back now, loose, with a pencil she had found somewhere holding it up. She was wearing a pair of my sweatpants that were 8 inches too long and a plain gray t-shirt she had found folded on the couch, which I did not remember putting there and which may have appeared the way things sometimes do. By some law of household physics I do not fully understand. I was going to ask if you had a spare room, she said. I do. It might take me a few days to figure out the next thing. The room is there, I said. She nodded once, the way someone nods when they are filing something away. I'll stay out of your way. You don't need to do that. I'll pay for groceries. You don't need to do that either. Marcus, she said my name with a kind of weight that I was not used to hearing from someone who had known me for approximately 12 hours. Let me contribute something. Fine, I said. Groceries, she said. And I won't ask you about work, and you won't ask me about the wedding. I wasn't going to ask you about the wedding. I know, she said. But I'm saying it anyway. I turned the page of the newspaper I had not been reading. Those terms are acceptable, I said. Something crossed her face then. Not quite a smile, but the relief that sometimes lives just behind one. You're very calm about this, she said. I'm a structural engineer, I said. I've seen weirder load distributions. She laughed at that, a real one, brief and surprised. And then she looked down at her coffee like she was slightly startled by the sound she had made. That was how it started. We cleared the spare room on Sunday afternoon. I moved the table saw to the garage, and Elena helped me carry out 3 boxes of materials for a shelving project I had been planning for 6 months and had not yet started. She did not comment on the boxes. She carried them without being asked, setting them in the garage with the same efficient neatness she had shown with her shoes the night before. And when we had gotten the room down to just the daybed and the dresser, she stood in the doorway and said, It's actually really nice in here. It will be, I said. When I finish the shelves, you should do the east wall, she said. The light hits it in the afternoon. You'd want to see what's on them. I looked at the east wall. I had been planning the west wall. I said, just a thought, she said. She was right about the east wall. I went to the hardware store on Tuesday to pick up stain for the bookcase in the living room, the one I had built the previous winter that still needed finishing. And she came with me because she was, as she put it, losing her mind sitting still. The hardware store on Powell was the kind of place that has been there long enough to have its own particular smell, a mix of sawdust and machine oil and something dry and mineral underneath. Elena walked in and looked around like she was somewhere interesting, which was not the usual response. She found me in the stain aisle standing in front of 2 cans of walnut that appeared to me essentially identical. What's the wood? She said. White oak. She picked up both cans and held them in the light from the overhead fixture, tipping them slightly. This one, she said, handing me the one on the left. They look the same to me. They're not, she said. That one is warmer, more orange in the undertone. The oak grain will fight it. You want the one with more gray in it. It'll let the grain do its thing. I looked at the can. I looked at her. How do you know that? I'm a graphic designer, she said. Color is most of what I do. She moved past me to look at the finishing oils, running her finger along the shelf. Also, I helped my dad refinish our kitchen floors when I was 16, and he was terrible at it, and I had to figure out the whole thing myself. Did it turn out okay? It looked great, she said. He still tells people he did it. She said it with the fond, slightly tired exasperation of someone who has been that daughter for a long time. And I filed it away, not as a thing to ask about later, but as a thing that told me something. We spent 45 minutes in that store. She knew things I did not expect her to know. She had opinions about sandpaper grit that she had clearly held for years and was mildly delighted to finally deploy. When we were in the checkout line, she put a small level in the basket without explaining why. And when I looked at her, she said, "You have 3 picture frames on your living room wall that are not level. It's been bothering me since yesterday morning. You've been here 2 days. It's been bothering me that whole time," she said. I paid for the level. In the parking lot, loading things into the back of my truck, she shut the tailgate and looked out at Powell Boulevard for a moment at the gray Tuesday afternoon traffic. She had her arms crossed against the September cold, and she was wearing a flannel I had given her because she had nothing with a collar, and the sleeves were rolled up 3 times to get to her hands. "Thank you," she said, "for the store, for letting me come. You picked the better stain." I said, "I owe you." She looked at me then, across the bed of the truck, with a particular expression of someone recalibrating something. It lasted about 2 seconds. Then she got in the passenger side and I got in the driver's side, and we drove home, and she put her feet on the dashboard, which I did not tell her not to do. She'd been there 5 days when Daniel called. I was in the living room applying the first coat of stain to the bookcase, the gray undertone walnut she had been right about, when I heard her phone from the kitchen. She did not answer it. A minute later, I heard the particular silence that means someone is listening to a voicemail, the slight stillness of a person holding very still. I kept the brush moving. I heard her set the phone down on the table. Then nothing for a long moment. "You can ask," she said. I looked up. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, leaning one shoulder against the frame, arms folded. Her expression was the one she got when she was holding something carefully. "I wasn't going to ask," I said. "I know," she said. "But you can." I set down the brush. "What did he say?" "That he's not angry." She said it flatly, the way you repeat something that was said in a certain tone that the words themselves do not carry. "That he understands I was scared. That we can push the date back." She paused. "That he loves me." The afternoon light was doing something complicated through the front window, falling across the floor in a long stripe between us. "What did you say back?" I asked. "Nothing yet." "Okay," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "You're not going to tell me what to do?" "No. Most people would." "I'm not most people," I said. "Also, it's none of my business." She tilted her head slightly, like she was listening to something at a frequency I could not hear. Then she pushed off the door frame and went back to the kitchen, and I heard her fill the kettle, and after a while, the particular sound of tea being made, which she had started doing in the afternoons. She did not call Daniel back that day. She did not call him the next day either. I did not ask about it. I noticed, and I did not ask. On Thursday night, I could not sleep. This happens sometimes, not insomnia exactly, more a restlessness that comes when something is working itself out and has not finished yet. I came downstairs at 11:30 and found the kitchen light already on, the small one above the counter, the one that throws a narrow band of light across the sink and leaves the rest of the room in a particular kind of dim. Elena was sitting at the table with a mug in both hands and her feet tucked up on the chair, and she looked at me when I came in and said, "I made chamomile. There's enough." I poured a mug and sat down across from her. For a while, neither of us said anything. The kitchen had the quiet that only exists late at night, when the street has gone still and the house settles into itself. The counterlight made her face look serious in a way the daytime did not. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." What made you stop expecting things? I looked at my mug. What do you mean? You don't seem like someone who stopped, she said, but you live like someone who did. The house is clearly important to you. The work is careful. Everything is taken care of. But there's no forward lean. You're not leaning toward anything. I sat with that for a moment. It was a precise observation, and I was not sure I wanted to confirm it to a woman I had known for less than a week, but there was something about 11:30 in a quiet kitchen that made the usual reasons for not saying things feel less necessary. I was engaged, I said, a few years ago. She ended it. What happened? She said I was the kind of man you appreciate, in theory. I said it evenly, the way I had learned to say it, not performing anything. She wanted someone who surprised her. Elena was quiet for a moment. That's a terrible thing to say. It wasn't meant to be terrible, I said. It was meant to be honest. It can be both. I looked at her. She was turning her mug slowly in her hands, watching me. I think I decided after that to stay close to the ground. I said, don't expect anything that requires a certain kind of luck. Don't build something that depends on someone else not changing their mind. I paused. It's a reasonable approach. It sounds like a reasonable approach, she said. But you left the porch light on, she said. Every night. That's not someone who stopped expecting things. I did not have a good answer for that. She looked down at her mug. The counter light was the only light in the room, and it caught the small diamond in her ear, just briefly. I was going to marry someone I did not know how to talk to, she said. She said it simply. The way you say something you have been carrying for a long time and have finally put into words that fit. We had been together 2 years, she said. We were good together in a certain way. He is not a bad person. He is organized and he is careful and he wants a specific kind of life. And I fit into it very neatly. And I think that is what I mistook for love for a while, that I fit. She touched the stud in her ear just once. I kept waiting to feel like myself when I was with him. I thought it was just nerves. I thought it would come after the engagement. Then I thought it would come after we moved in together. Then I thought, maybe after the wedding. Maybe that is the moment it clicks into place. She stopped. And then? I said, and then I was standing in the back of the church and I thought, what if it does not come after? Either. She said it quietly to the mug. What if I am standing in the back of a church at 60 and it still has not come? What if I just keep waiting? She looked up, so I left. In the dress. I said, in the dress. She said, I did not plan it. There was no plan. I just started walking and I could not make myself stop. I thought about what to say. And I said the wrong thing first, which was nothing. And then I said, you'll tell me if he calls again. Why? So I know, I said, that is all. So I know what is happening. She looked at me for a moment across the table, the counter light steady between us. You'll tell me if that bothers you, she said, having me here. If it starts to bother you, it doesn't bother me. It might, Elena. I said her name carefully. It doesn't bother me. She held my eyes for a moment, and then she looked down, and we sat there in the kitchen for another hour, mostly not talking, and at one point she got up to refill her mug and she put her hand briefly on my shoulder as she passed, not saying anything, just that, and I sat very still. And when she came back and sat down, I'd moved my hand to the center of the table, and her hand came to rest a few inches away, and neither of us addressed it, and we stayed like that until the tea was cold and we both went back to bed. I lay in the dark for a long time afterward, my hand still carrying the specific warmth of almost. She'd been there 8 days when I came downstairs on a Friday morning to find her standing at the kitchen window in the old flannel shirt. Not the gray t-shirt she had borrowed the first morning. The flannel, the dark green one I had since graduate school. Soft and worn at the elbows. The kind of thing that stops being a shirt and becomes a category of comfort. I did not know where she had found it. I did not ask. She heard me on the stairs and turned, and she was holding my coffee cup, the blue enamel one I always use first, the one with the small chip on the handle, and she had poured 2 cups and set mine on the table already and was drinking from hers. Morning, she said. Morning, I said. I sat down. She sat down across from me. The October light was coming in sideways through the window, the early kind. and there was condensation on the outside of the glass from the cold and the kitchen warmth, and the oak leaves were starting to come down in the yard. She had the flannel buttoned all the way up except the collar. Her hair was down and it had the particular looseness of someone who has slept on it, and she was looking at me the way she sometimes looked when she was deciding something. "I like your house in the morning," she said. "It's a good house in the morning," I said. "The light does something different in here than I've seen in other places." "East-facing kitchen," I said. It was one of the things I bought it for. She considered this. "You knew you wanted that." "I knew I wanted that," I said. She reached for the sugar bowl and her hand brushed mine on the table. Not accidentally, not entirely on purpose either, somewhere in the territory between, and we both felt it, the specific change of temperature that happens when two people are paying close attention to each other and one of them moves a half inch. Neither of us moved away. "Marcus," she said. "Yeah," I said. She looked at me. The flannel shirt was my flannel shirt, and she was sitting in my kitchen drinking from the mug I always use first, and outside the oak tree was dropping leaves into the yard. And I had not expected this, and I had left the porch light on, and I did not yet know what any of it amounted to. "Thank you," she said, "for not making me explain myself." "You don't owe me an explanation," I said. "I know," she said. "That's what I'm thanking you for." Our hands were still on the table, not touching now, a half inch apart, and neither of us moved to close it or to take it back. It stayed like that for a long moment, the two of us in the morning light, and then she picked up her coffee and I picked up mine, and we sat there while the oak tree dropped its leaves, and the kitchen held us like it had been built for this specific morning, which it had not been, but which is sometimes how a house makes you feel when you have filled it with the right kind of quiet. I thought, this is the kind of thing I stopped expecting. I thought I should probably stop thinking about it. I did not stop thinking about it. Daniel arrived on Saturday morning. I did not know he was coming. Elena did not know either. Based on the way she went, still when she saw his car pulling up from the kitchen window, her coffee mug held halfway to her mouth and then not moving anymore. He was driving a gray car, clean, without being ostentatious. And he parked it with the precise efficiency of someone who has parallel parked on city streets for years without ever once having to correct. He was taller than I expected, better looking. He walked up the porch steps with his hands in the pockets of a dark wool coat like a man who has prepared himself to be reasonable, which is a specific kind of preparation and not the easiest kind. Elena set her mug down on the counter. "I didn't tell him I was here," she said. "Jess?" I said. She closed her eyes for a moment. "Jess?" I went to answer the door. He introduced himself with a handshake, which I found interesting. His grip was firm without being a demonstration. He said, "I'm Daniel. I think you're the man Elena's been staying with." He said it without audible edge, and that absence of edge was itself a kind of statement. A man who has decided not to be threatened because being threatened would cost him something in the negotiation he had come here to conduct. "Marcus," I said. "Come in." "I'd like to talk to Elena," he said. "If that's okay." "That's up to Elena," I said. She was already standing in the kitchen doorway behind me. I went upstairs. I did not pretend to do anything useful. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the floor, listening to the voices below at their careful, moderate volume, the register of two people conducting a serious conversation without wanting to perform it, staying just below the threshold of a fight. The plaster walls in a 1924 Craftsman are good walls. They are not that good. He was not what I had steeled myself for, which was someone easy to dislike. He told her he was not angry. He said fear at the altar was not uncommon and that he was not going to pretend the past 10 days had not happened, but that he was willing to move the date, to take whatever time she needed, to have any conversation she wanted to have. He said he loved her. I believed that he believed it. I sat upstairs thinking about the difference between someone who believes they love you and someone who actually sees you, and how from the inside, those two things can feel identical right up until they do not. Then his voice shifted, still calm, still even, but something underneath it had changed texture. "This is what you do, Elena," he said. A pause. "You ran from New York. You ran from the Hawthorne apartment. Every time something asks something real of you, you find the door. I am not saying this to hurt you. I am saying it because I know you. And I know that what you are calling clarity right now is what you always feel right after you run. It is relief. It is the feeling of not having to do the hard thing. And relief is not the same as being right. Silence from her. I want you to think about what you are doing, he said. Staying here with a man you do not know. I want you to honestly ask yourself what that is about, what you are getting from it that you think you cannot get from me. Another silence. I know you, he said. And then quieter, with the careful precision of someone who has been holding a sentence for a while and has chosen this moment to put it down. You don't actually want someone who sees you, Elena. You want someone who leaves you enough room to disappear. I sat completely still on the edge of the bed. It was a skilled thing to say. It took her self-doubt and gave it his handwriting. It made her leaving not a choice but a symptom, not clarity but a pattern. And it did it in a voice so measured and sorrowful that it would be very hard to argue with without sounding defensive, which was precisely the point. I heard her say something I could not make out. Think about it, he said. That is all I am asking. I heard the front door open and close. I heard the car pull away from the curb. I waited. She did not come upstairs. I came down after 10 minutes to find her standing at the kitchen counter with her phone to her ear, her back to me, and I could hear her mother's voice from where I stood. Not the words, but the tone, which had the particular quality of a woman making a careful inventory of consequences. I filled a glass of water and stood near the window and looked at the yard. I heard Elena say, "Mom," once, then silence while she listened. I heard the deposit on the venue, the invitations, the people who had already traveled, the Hendersons from Sacramento, the fact that Daniel was willing to move the date, the fact that Elena had built something and she was about to leave it on a porch somewhere because she got scared. And fear was not a reason. Fear was something you worked through. Fear was something every woman felt before a wedding, and you did not run from it in the dress. I heard Elena say, "I have to go," and hang up. She stood there with her phone in her hand, not moving, looking at the counter. I did not say anything. After a while, she turned around. She looked the way someone looks when they have been holding something up for a long time and are starting to feel the weight. Not broken, just tired. The specific tiredness of a person who has been arguing against the current and is no longer certain which direction is upstream. "Maybe he's right," she said. I looked at her, not about all of it. She shook her head, but about the pattern. I did leave New York. I did leave the Hawthorne apartment. She set her phone on the counter. I leave things. I've left a lot of things. Maybe that's just what I do. Or, I said, "You've been in the wrong places." That's what people say when they don't want to examine themselves. "It's also sometimes just true," I said. She looked at me with the expression she got when she was deciding whether to trust an argument or the person making it. "I don't know how to tell the difference," she said, "between leaving because something is wrong and leaving because I'm the one who's broken." I thought about what to say. I thought about saying a lot of things about Daniel's careful voice and the way he had used her own self-doubt as a blueprint, about the distinction between a pattern and a reason, about the fact that she had come inside that first night without hesitating, and that people who only ever run do not come inside. I did not say any of it. "Elena," I said. She looked at me. "What do you want?" She blinked. "Not from him," I said. "Not from your mother. Not from Jess or the venue deposit or what the Hendersons from Sacramento think. What do you actually want?" She stood there in my kitchen in my flannel shirt, with her feet bare on the floor I had refinished, and outside the oak tree was dropping leaves in the October wind, and she looked at me like the question was something she had not been asked in a very long time. She did not answer. Not yet. She picked up her phone from the counter and walked past me to the back door and out onto the porch, and I watched her sit down on the top step in the cold afternoon air and put her arms around her knees and look out at the yard. And she stayed there for a long time while the leaves came down around her, and I went to the kitchen table and sat down and waited. This was the part I could not do for her. This was the part that had to be hers. She came back inside just before 4 o'clock. I had not moved from the kitchen table. I had not looked at my phone or opened a book or done the things a person does to pass time without appearing to wait. I had just sat there with the afternoon moving across the floor in a slow stripe of light, watching it, thinking about load paths, about what holds and what does not, and how you cannot always tell from the outside which is which until you put the weight on. I heard the back door. She was carrying her shoes. Not the white satin heels. Those were still by the front door where she had left them 9 days ago. The canvas sneakers she had borrowed from the basket by the back door. She was carrying them in one hand the same way she had carried the wedding heels that first night, straps looped over 2 fingers, and something about that detail settled into me like a thing I already knew. She set them down by the door, toes out. She stood there for a moment without saying anything, just looking at her bare feet on the floor, and then she looked up. "I need to call him," she said. "Okay," I said. She held my eyes for a moment. She was not asking for permission, and she was not asking for anything. She was just making sure I was there, which I was. She picked up her phone and went to the living room, and I stayed where I was, and I heard her dial. The call was not long. I heard her voice through the plaster. Calm. Not cold, not performing the calm either. Just the real kind, the kind that costs something to arrive at. I heard her say, "I'm not calling to negotiate." A pause while he said something. Then her again. "The problem wasn't that I got scared," she said. "The problem was that it took me 2 years to realize I was never going to stop being scared. That's not cold feet, Daniel. That's an answer." I set my hands flat on the kitchen table and looked at the grain in the wood. The particular run of it I had spent a Sunday afternoon following with sandpaper, and I thought, there it is. The thing she could not say at the altar, the thing that had been true the whole time, waiting to be said out loud so she could know it was true. Another silence from the other room. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry." Then, "Goodbye." I heard the phone go face down on the couch. I heard her stand in the other room for a long moment, then her footsteps across the floor, and she was in the kitchen doorway. She was leaning against the frame with her arms crossed and her eyes bright, not with sadness exactly, but with the expression of someone who has just done a hard thing correctly and is still absorbing what that means about them. Like finding out you are stronger than you thought you were, which is not always a comfortable thing to find out. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. She came and sat down across from me at the table. Neither of us said anything for a while. The kitchen light was going golden and low, the afternoon version, and the yard outside was moving with wind, leaves coming off the oak in small, unhurried surrenders. "I kept thinking," she said finally, "that there would be a moment where everything made sense, where I would look at him across her room and think, yes, that is why I am doing this. That is the answer." She looked at her hands. It never came. She turned her mug slowly on the table, the same small motion she always made when she was deciding whether to say the real thing. "The night I ended up on your porch," she said, "I did not know where I was going. I just walked until I saw a light." She looked up. "I've thought about that a lot this week. The fact that I stopped here. I keep trying to figure out if it means something or if it's just geography." "What did you decide?" I said. "I decided I was tired of treating my own instincts like they needed to be argued into court." She paused. "I stopped here because I stopped here, because the light was on, because something told me to." She looked at me. "I'm done apologizing for that." I looked at her across the table. The woman who had set her shoes down neatly on her first night, who had known the better walnut stain, who had asked me careful questions about the things I had built, who had said the things she could never say and had come back inside anyway. "Has it come here?" I said. "The moment, the yes." She looked at me. "Yes," she said. She said it simply. No drama in it. Just the word, set down with the same deliberate care she brought to everything she decided to keep. I said, "Is this okay?" And she looked at me the way she had that morning in the parking lot, like something had shifted slightly into focus. "The fact that you're still asking me that," she said, "is most of why the answer is yes." She stood up from the table. I stood up from the table. She crossed the 3 feet between us and put her hands on either side of my face, the way you hold something you have been looking for and are making sure is real. And I said, "Can I kiss you?" And she said, "I came back inside, didn't I?" So I did. It was not a grand thing. It was the kind of kiss that happens in a kitchen on a Saturday afternoon in October, with bare feet on a hardwood floor and one person's hands still carrying the cold from sitting outside. And it lasted only a moment before she pulled back and looked at me close up, serious, the way she had looked at those 2 cans of walnut stain in the hardware store aisle, like she was confirming something she already knew but wanted to see directly. Your porch light, she said. Yeah, I said. I saw it from the street, she said. I was 3 houses past it before I turned around. I almost did not stop. She looked at me. I almost kept walking. I thought about that, about the raccoon situation that turned out not to be the raccoon, about keys as the nearest heavy object and a woman sitting on the second step with one shoe that had lost its bow, about how the whole thing had turned on a 4-second window in the dark. I'm glad you stopped, I said. She put her forehead against mine, just briefly, her hand still on my face, and I thought about the east-facing kitchen and the porch light and all the careful things I had built in a life I decided to keep close to the ground, and I thought, some structures are built for a specific kind of load. You do not know what kind until it arrives. Outside, a gust came through the yard, and the oak tree gave up a dozen leaves at once, unhurried, and neither of us moved, and I did not explain what I felt, and I did not need to. 1 year later, almost to the day, I was pulling onto Tenino Avenue after a long day at the office. A bridge review in Beaverton had run 3 hours over schedule, and I was tired in the specific way that comes from too many hours under fluorescent lights and not enough of the work that uses your hands. I turned onto my street, and the first thing I saw was the porch light on. That was not unusual. The porch light had been on every evening for 2 years before I met her. What was different now was that I had left the office before Elena, and she had gotten home first, and she had turned it on without being asked, without thinking about it probably. Just the way you do a thing that seems obvious when you have been doing it long enough to forget it was ever a choice. I sat in the truck for a moment before I went in. I thought about the night she had first seen it from the street, the 3 houses she had walked past before she turned around, the 4 seconds that turned out to contain something I had spent 4 years not expecting, a man turning on a porch light for no one in particular and not quite admitting that was what it was doing. I thought about what she had said, sitting on the back porch in the October afternoon, with her arms around her knees and the leaves coming down around her, that she was tired of treating her own instincts like they needed to be argued into court. I thought about how that had turned out to be advice I needed as much as she did. There were 2 pairs of shoes in the basket by the front door. Hers were the small canvas ones she wore to the coffee shop on Saturday mornings, sitting beside my work boots, with the easy certainty of things that have found their right arrangement. Her jacket was on the hook next to mine. She had put a plant on the porch railing sometime in September, and it was still there, still alive, which she considered a personal victory and which I had privately come to think of as a reasonable symbol for how the 2 of us had managed things. Inside, she was at the kitchen table with her laptop and a mug of tea, and her feet tucked up on the chair, working in that concentrated sideways way she had when she was deep in something, head tilted, one hand holding her hair back from her face. The east wall shelves I had finally finished in March were full now, her design books on the upper 2 shelves, my engineering references below, the whole thing fitting together in a way that made sense without having been planned, which is its own kind of structural principle. She heard me come in and looked up. How was the bridge? She said, the bridge is fine, I said. 3 of the stakeholders are not fine. I made enough soup, she said. She said it the way she said most things, simply, without making it into a gesture, just a fact she wanted me to have. I hung up my jacket and came and sat down across from her, and she pushed my mug across the table without looking up, already filled, and I thought, this is it. Not the moment on the porch steps or the kiss in the October kitchen or even the morning I found her at the window in my flannel shirt with the coffee already made. This is the thing. A Tuesday evening in a kitchen on Tenino Avenue with the porch light on and soup enough for 2 and not a single extraordinary thing happening anywhere. This is what it feels like when a life fits. She looked up from her screen and caught me looking at her and said, what? Nothing, I said. She looked at me for a moment with that expression, the one that means she knows it is not nothing and has decided to let it be nothing anyway. And then she went back to her work, and I picked up my coffee, and outside the oak tree was quiet in the November dark, and the porch light held. Some people spend their whole lives looking for a place that feels like home, not understanding they have been leaving the light on for it all along. If you had opened your door that night, a stranger on your porch in a wedding dress at 11:42, what would you have done? Have you ever had a moment where you almost kept walking and did not? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, hit like and subscribe. There are more stories coming, and I do not want you to miss them.